Chapter 25. The Sharing of Secrets. Twilight felt this unbelievable mix of shock and outrage as she watched the Cyan Pegasus depart from the train. Immediately, she was swarmed by Pinkie, Rarity, and Applejack, the four friends instantly beginning to chat and catch up on one another's lives, laughing and snickering all the while. Twilight was left ignored, thankfully, and it gave her ample time to process this unlikely reunion. Out of all of the thoughts and emotions flying through Twilight's mind right now, there were two feelings that were the strongest and loudest of all of them. The first was complete and utter outrage. Outrage so strong that it managed to manifest itself as the briefest crackle of arcane sparks about her horn, before she reined it back in. The impossible odds that this pony, of all ponies, was the one who showed up here and now were 1 in a trillion. Yet Twilight had seemingly been unlucky enough to catch that unlikely one. No, this wasn't luck. This was planned. Not by her, not by Rainbow, not even by Pinkie, but by some higher power. The same higher power that had led her to Ponyville in the first place, and the same that managed to convince her to stay with nothing more than a timely gust of wind. And while before she was resistantly accepting of fate's conspiracy against her, now she was absolutely livid about it. But that rage was kept in check by one of the few emotions that could overpower it in a head-on fight. Fear. Complete and utter terror about what this reunion meant for Twilight's life in Ponyville. Rainbow Dash was not a subtle pony, and not just because of her appearance. She was loud, obnoxious, and an egomaniac that absolutely thrived on the attention and praise of others. And that wasn't something that was hard to come by, given her apparent Wonderbolt status. She was undeniably talented, a prodigy in the art of flight, and that was usually enough to satiate her ego. But in the time Twilight had known her, she had never passed up on a chance to point out her own amazing feats. She was a gloater, and this was what scared Twilight, because Rainbow was one of the few ponies with access to some very sensitive information. Rainbow knew her secrets. All of the ones that mattered, at least. And those secrets, as it so happened, were tied to an accomplishment of the Wonderbolts that she'd absolutely love to draw attention to, given the chance. And with Twilight here, there was no better chance than right now to do just that. And if that happened, she could kiss any chance of laying low in this town goodbye, especially this close to Canterlot. Twilight was lucky thus far, and had yet to be noticed by the most dangerous pony in Ponyville right now, and she wanted to make good on that luck while she still could. Her head and her ears lowered as she turned to slink away. The crowd was still pretty dense. They would make for good cover to at least get her out of her foe's direct line of sight. All she had to do then was get back to her house and lock herself away with Spike for however long it took for the Pegasus to flock off. Or perhaps she could hide out in Zecora's hut, seeing as how it was a bit more remote and out of the way. The self-imposed exile might have been a bit extreme and not very rational, but it was the fastest way to get out of this unfortunate situation scot-free.
Twilight, where are you going? Didn't you want to meet Dash?
But of course, all it took was one simple question from Pinkie Pie to shatter all hopes of victory and escape in one moment. Her voice piercing Twilight's paranoid mind like cannon fire. For a few short seconds, Twilight stood there like a statue, hoping in vain that Pinkie was asking that question of a different Twilight. It was certainly possible, but the odds were astronomically low. And Twilight had already met her quota for beating impossible odds today, thanks entirely to the very Pegasus she was trying to sneak away from. There was no getting out of this anymore. So she raised her head and turned around. Just as she feared, she was greeted to the sight of the 4 other mares looking back at her.
Hello.
She spoke in a soft and meek voice, one that made Fluttershy sound like Pinkie Pie. There were looks of confusion on their faces, without question, but they were of little concern to Twilight right now. She was too focused on Rainbow's face to even care about the others. It was clear to see that the reunion was a surprise to her, too. Her eyes were wide and a dumbfounded expression was all over her face.
No way.
Dash just stood there for a moment, thoroughly astonished, before a smug grin came across her face.
Never thought I'd see you again. How have you been, egghead?
Twilight wanted to vomit, she was so upset. This was it. All of her secrets were about to be laid bare for all the world to see, all just to fuel the all-consuming ego that belonged to this Pegasus. The terror coursing through her veins was enough to lock her firmly in place. She couldn't run, she couldn't cast spells, she could hardly even breathe. All she could do was wait for this wonderbolt to destroy her.
Wait, you two know each other already?
Pinkie interrupted in a blatantly disappointed tone. Dash chuckled again.
Yeah, you could say we've met once or twice. That's certainly unexpected,
Rarity commented with a tilted head.
though I suppose it's not impossible given your lifestyle, Twilight.
And just as Pinkie had damned her, Rarity had saved her. And that ticket came in the form of an ever-appreciated reminder that Twilight had spent the past 2 years, soon to be 3, on the road, traveling Equestria and beyond. That simple reminder brought hope and life back into her, and she had to fight the urge to shout out in glee about it. Instead, she took on a more casual, albeit a bit shy persona, in order to try and better sell the tall tale she was about to tell.
Yeah, I've met her on my travels once or twice. Caught a couple of her shows here and there. Sorry for acting weird. You could say I'm something of a fan. Wasn't expecting to see her here.
The hasty alibi wasn't the best in the world, but it would add up. Wonderbolts were well known for public displays of their physical prowess, performing in air shows for any number of reasons. Typically fundraisers to donate to charities or help pay for some of Equestria's military assets, and these shows were held all over the nation. Considering that Twilight had made no effort to hide her vagabonding lifestyle, it made perfect sense that she'd have bumped into one of those shows. Rainbow's grin faded into a dull frown, a huff slowly reaching up to lower her sunglasses. As the eyelid was lowered, an eyebrow was raised. The look was clearly meant to convey the question,
What? Really?
without a single word at all.
Oh, small world.
Pinkie blurted back into the conversation enthusiastically.
Guess that makes introductions easier, huh? Yeah, you could say that.
Dash gave another brief chuckle, and a wink to Twilight before readjusting her sunglasses to once again shield her eyes.
So let's skip him and blow this pot stand. I want to get off my hooves.
The order was enough to get the small group moving, Twilight following meekly behind in an almost automated fashion. She didn't want to linger around Rainbow Dash for too long, but right now she was more focused on keeping her secret safe. And since avoidance was no longer an option, the best course of action was to stick to her like glue and dissuade any and all attempts from blowing Twilight's cover. That was the plan, and she nodded to herself certainly as she trailed behind the group of friends towards the train station exit. But it seemed she had company at the back of the pack, Albajack having decided to slow her pace so she could walk side by side with her.
So, y'all were acting a bit weird back there,
the farmer whispered, gentler than when she was speaking of Nox just minutes earlier. But she looked equally nervous as when she was talking about that, which put no end of horrid ideas as to where this particular conversation was going to go into Twilight's head.
Just a bit nervous. Kind of weird meeting a celebrity out of the blue, you know?
The lie was enough to make Twilight want to puke again, but it was the only way to keep the truth hidden. She'd already committed to the lie, so now she had to keep it going.
You don't have a crush on her or anything, do ya?
Albajack's next hushed question came, quite literally, out of nowhere. To the point that it would have made Twilight do a spit take were she in the middle of drinking anything. It was about then that the small party of ponies exited the station and set foot into the sunlight.
Well,
What? No, it's nothing like that.
Twilight was blunt and clear with the answer, not wanting to make it look like she was trying to deflect the question.
That's not even... Why would you even...
She stopped herself when something unusual caught her attention. It was on Applejack's face, oddly enough. A slight glint to her lips, more apparent now in the brighter sunlight around them. But it wasn't moisture. There was a slight, unnatural hue to it.
Is she wearing lip gloss?
The silent question led Twilight to further examine the farmer's face, taking notice of other subtle hints of touching up she'd done. The most subtle hints of eyeshadow and mascara could be detected, only acting as slight highlights of her natural tones, easily missed if one wasn't looking. And then there were her eyes themselves, each emerald orb filled to the brim with undeniable anxiety and doubt. And, unless Twilight was misreading the situation, a different kind of fear than what she was experiencing earlier. There was only one logical explanation, and Twilight could solve this whole situation with a simple counter-question. She asked it in a similarly quiet tone, out of respect for the Earth Pony's dignity.
Do you have a crush on her?
If one looked closely, they could almost see the beads of sweat beginning to form on Applejack's face. Twilight could see she was struggling not to contort her face or break eye contact. She had pushed the right button, and was now beginning to regret turning the tables on her like this.
well, just say,
Target is in position! Fire!
Scootaloo's shrill voice pierced the silence, bringing the group of ponies to a sudden stop as they looked towards the cluster of bushes where they came from. Though their eyes weren't locked there for long, as a massive wobbling mass was launched from beyond the brush towards them. A giant water balloon had been flung from the shadows towards the 5 ponies, Rainbow Dash specifically. Well, if nothing else, Twilight knew what the trebuchet was for now.
Nice.
Rainbow chuckled with a slight nod.
Everybody move!
What happened next all happened too fast for anyone to think or react outside of base instinct. Dash's actions were quicker than her words, and she took the opportunity to show off her athletic prowess by backflipping out of the balloon's impact radius. This action had the unintentional consequence of getting Twilight and Applejack further back from the soon-to-be impact site. Pinkie Pie was also quick in her evacuation, bounding out of the way with the grace befitting of a gazelle. Rarity, however, was less graceful in her escape. Panic had overwhelmed her senses and motor skills, and the unicorn was unfortunate enough to trip over her own hooves as she was lost in the balloon's ever-growing shadow. It wasn't long after her collision with the grass that she was swallowed by the descending attack, lost entirely under the balloon's impressive girth. She wouldn't have been able to move underneath the gallons and gallons of liquid currently situated right on top of her, pinning her to the ground. And then it popped. Rarity screamed in such a way to put a banshee to shame, overwhelmed by what had just happened, soaked thoroughly by the balloon's contents and entangled in the rubbery remnants of what had just struck her. The outcry was shrill, loud, and far from pleasant. It was also what got the 3 fillies responsible for the assault to poke their heads out of their green hiding place.
Hey, no fair! You're not supposed to dodge it!
Out of the 3, Scootaloo was the one who was the most upset by this development, but only because she had missed her intended target. Meanwhile, Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle were looking at one another with a shared expression of dread and regret. They knew that they had screwed up royally, and were now awaiting the wrath that was to befall them.
That really the best you got, kid? A water balloon?
Rainbow Dash, in response, merely scoffed at the efforts.
A big one, I'll give you that, but it's vinegar!
Rarity shrieked again, recoiling in absolute disgust and agony. It was a miracle that the impact hadn't physically harmed her in some way. Even more so, she was able to simply stand back up without any issues.
Sweetie Belle, why would you do this to me?
Apple Bloom! Applejack shouted it sternly, face flushed red with both embarrassment and rage. Oh, just you wait till Granny hears about this! She's gonna wring you like a towel! That was about when the young ponies decided to make a hasty retreat. Rarity went from screaming to roaring as she chased down her younger sibling, yelling for Pinkie to help her catch her. And while Pinkie wasn't anywhere near as upset about this whole ordeal as Rarity was, she was willing to help out her friend deliver her righteous retribution. Applejack, meanwhile, went after her own younger sister and the young Pegasus that seemed to have been the mastermind behind this mess. Though Twilight had the sneaking suspicion that part of that choice was made just to get out of the awkward conversation that the two had been having moments before. And just like that, before they could even react to the unusual situation, Twilight and Rainbow were left completely alone in front of Ponyville's train station. The Wonderbolt took this opportunity to walk over to the impact site. She scooped up a strand of shredded rubber that Rarity had left behind in her rampage and began to investigate, recoiling at the strong stench of vinegar that wafted about the space.
Vinegar balloon, huh? Not bad.
Rainbow chuckled as she overlooked her soaked form, looking back to Twilight with a wide, toothy grin.
Not good enough to get me, though. Little sisters, am I right? Little rascal always tries to prank me like that every time I come home for vacation. I wouldn't know. Never had a sister.
Twilight droned back as she cautiously approached. The scent of vinegar was potent, to say the least, and she didn't want to get too close to Rainbow right now because of it.
I didn't know you had one either. Yep. Well, half-sister anyway. Her mom and my dad hooked up one night. They got married about a year later, and about a year after that, I woke up to find I had a little sister.
Dash shrugged nonchalantly.
It was a weird Tuesday.
And just like that, so many of Scootaloo's mannerisms and behavioral quirks made sense. If she'd grown up with this mare of all people as a role model. There was no doubt now that Scootaloo's habit of answering questions with "nothing illegal" came from this particular pony.
So then, big fan of mine?
Dash continued in a mocking tone of voice.
Wasn't expecting to see you here, though. Did you come to get my autograph? You know, because you're such a big fan. Oh, shut up.
Twilight rolled her eyes with a groan, continuing her journey past the train station and walking past Rainbow without a second glance.
Like you had a better alibi. Actually, I did.
Dash sang back with pride in her voice.
But I guess it was just a different Twilight Sparkle who helped me with my Wonderbolt history exams. You know, the ones that you actually helped me with.
Twilight did what she could to stifle her groan of discontent, not wanting to give Rainbow the satisfaction of knowing that she had forgotten about that part of their past. She shook her head at a disapproving pace and just kept walking. But she could hear Rainbow following behind her, meaning that this conversation wasn't over, much to her dismay. Today was going to be a very long day, wasn't it?
Oh, come on, lighten up, egghead.
Dash quickly leapt ahead and began walking side by side with Twilight, still bearing that same cheesy grin.
You're not still mad at me, are you? Yes, I am.
Twilight practically snarled.
What are you even doing here? Well, in case the welcoming party and the little sister weren't clear, I live here.
Dash's tone of voice was almost painfully sarcastic, serving to prove that she hadn't changed at all since the last time they'd met. Again, to Twilight's dismay.
I'm the one who should be asking you what you're doing here, but something tells me you don't want to have that conversation in public. Good guess.
Twilight sighed back in relief, content in the knowledge that Rainbow knew that secrets were supposed to stay that way. With that newfound discovery, any reason Twilight would have had to stick around this irksome individual were rendered null and void. Though as she began to walk away, she knew the Pegasus was following behind her.
Oh, come on! You don't even want to catch up?
There was this clear eagerness in Dash's tone as she overtook Twilight's pace, spinning around to walk backward and keep eye contact as they advanced.
Don't tell me you're still mad about the— Yes, I am. I just said that.
Twilight sneered back as she changed her heading. This didn't do much to deter Rainbow, who simply switched to walking side by side with her instead. But Rainbow didn't need to finish the question for Twilight to know what was being referenced there.
I caught him.
Seemed like the Wonderbolt didn't need the refresher either, whispering that bit with a shocking amount of subtlety.
He wasn't even hurt. Not the point. You still made him jump by pushing me off a cliff. But you have—
Rainbow stopped herself mid-argument, biting her tongue for a brief moment.
Look, I'm being very nice right now. I hope you know that. I could blow the whistle on you at any moment. You could at least give me the time of day.
Twilight stomped, prompting Rainbow to do the same a second or two later, and she looked back to her old acquaintance with this bitter attempt at understanding on her face. When Dash turned back around to look at her, Twilight could clearly see the eagerness and anticipation in her eyes. It was almost childlike in nature. It was clear that Rainbow was the one who wanted to talk. About what, though? Twilight hadn't the faintest idea, but based on the glint in her eyes, Rainbow wasn't going to stomp until she got Twilight to hear her out. So there was only one way to get out of this situation.
Okay, fine. I'll bite. What do you want?
Dash had to stop herself from squealing as unbridled excitement overtook her expression. It didn't take her long to calm herself down and take up a more neutral look.
I can't tell you here. Too many ears. You're not the only one with secrets.
That got Twilight to raise a brow, taking the time to study both her tone and her expression. There wasn't much to be read in either department, and that was unsettling. She couldn't tell why Dash would want to go out of her way to tell Twilight these secrets, or why she was being so insistent on it. There had to be a motivating factor here. The mayor in question was never one to do much that didn't serve her best interests, and Twilight wasn't 100% sure if she wanted to indulge her. But she'd already learned that the best way out was straight through, and thus made her decision knowing full well that she might come to regret it. With one swift motion, Twilight placed a hoof on Rainbow's chest, and the two of them were whisked away from Ponyville's train station in a bright flash of magic. The next thing both of them knew, they were standing in the safety and isolation of Twilight's living room.
There. No more ears. You can talk now.
Twilight stumbled a bit as she walked over towards the room's hideous couch and placed her saddlebags on it. It seemed the teleportation spell was pushing it a bit too much after all this day's spellcasting. Just a bit more strain than she was expecting, not a whole lot. Once the bags were off her back, she quickly went to remove the heavy cloak concealing her true nature. No need to hide in front of someone who knows, after all.
Spike, you can come out now too. Guess you picked up a few things from that prissy school you went to, huh?
Rainbow Dash responded tauntingly as Spike crawled out from his hiding place. She wasn't exactly interested in the Long Dragon, and instead took the time to look around her surroundings and parse where she ended up.
Didn't expect you to bring me home, though. And without even buying me dinner first? Damn, Egghead, you got game. Oh, it's you.
Spike sounded about as enthusiastic to see Rainbow as Twilight had been, the sentiment showing plainly on his face.
Yay. Good to see you too, Scales.
Dash seemed almost insulted by the disinterested greeting.
You've grown a bit since last time I saw you. Jump off any good cliffs lately? What's that supposed to mean?
Spike tilted his head in confusion, seemingly not knowing what was being referenced. It made sense, after all. The event Ash was talking about did happen 5 years ago. He probably didn't even remember it. Or blocked out the memory. It was one or the other. Maybe both.
I'll tell you later.
Twilight interjected before clearing her throat.
Now then, Dash, you wanted to talk about something? Ah, right. Give me a sec.
Rainbow's bags were swiftly placed on the floor before she began digging into the cluttered mess within one of them. The most prevalent sounds were the rustling of paper, oddly enough. She didn't seem like the type for paperwork, but becoming a Wonderbolt might have overwritten the preference.
Oh, come on. Where is this stupid thing?
Twilight and Spike didn't say anything as they watched their houseguest rummage through her things, occasionally removing something and tossing it to the side just to get it out of the way. Loose pieces of paper, folders, and even a book or two were all deposited onto the floor as Rainbow frantically searched for the object of her desires. And among these random documents and texts, there were a few that managed to catch Twilight's attention. The books were nothing special, flight manuals of various complexity, most standard text depicting Wonderbolt's repertoire of flying maneuvers and codes of conduct. Others looked to be old history books. Again, not a big surprise. Wonderbolts, for one reason or another, were required to be well-versed in Equestria's history. It made sense as to why Rainbow would be carrying around that kind of reading material, covering everything from Equestria's founding to the most recent events in history. But these seemed small compared to what else Rainbow had in her possession. Folders and documents stamped red with the word classified, alongside the equestrian royal crest, the former barely being bound together by overburdened paper clips. Things that looked very illegal to have in one's personal possession, even for a Wonderbolt. And the sheer amount of classified documents didn't help Rainbow's case in the slightest. If either of them were caught with these, they'd be locked away for longer than Twilight would be alive. And in the Pegasus's haste, one of the folders managed to pop open as it lightly hit the ground, revealing the secrets within. Twilight shouldn't have looked, she knew that, but she couldn't help but catch a quick peek. 3 words stuck out to her. Coral Lumini Loony.
Ah, here it is!
Dash bellowed out, an act not acknowledged by Twilight. Even so, Rainbow tucked whatever she'd been looking for under a wing before approaching Twilight, cutting off her line of sight from the sensitive information she'd been presented with.
Now then, there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a very long time now, and I see no better opportunity than right now. Would you like to guess what it is?
Twilight shook herself out of her stupor, looking to Rainbow with great intensity. What did this mare know? Where did she get her hooves on these files? How did she get them at all? So many questions piling up in Twilight's head. So much that she could hardly think of anything else, let alone answer the question she had just been asked. It was hard to tell if she had even heard it.
Alright, I'll take your silence as a no.
Rainbow snickered.
Well, I don't know what this means coming from me, but I wanted to thank you.
Rainbow's wing unfurled itself, reaching around to present what she had plucked from her saddlebags. And that small object was enough to answer basically all of Twilight's questions, and it made her jaw drop. The trinket was a simple badge, about the size of a hoof, cast in a coal black iron. The design of the badge was simple. An upright horseshoe surrounding a depiction of the equestrian royal crest, partially obscured by a large red ruby that had been domed over the mark, acting as a tinted window of sorts. The shoe was engraved with Rainbow Dash's name, undeniable proof that this object was hers and hers alone. The badge was one that was well known in Equestria, all things considered, but one that not many had ever laid eyes on in person, to the point that it became something of an urban legend, a rumor with virtually no evidence of its existence, or the existence of the organization that it belonged to.
Because of you, I'm set for life.
Rainbow's well-earned confidence was evidenced as she passed the badge to her hoof and looked on it herself, admiring her tinted reflection in the ruby core.
And I just wanted to thank you for that. It's just a badge.
Spike's interjection absolutely killed the mood.
What's the big deal? Because it means she's a black hoof.
Twilight murmured in disbelief, beginning to question the reality she lived in. This had to be some kind of dream or nightmare, right? Any second now, the Mare in the Moon would show up and prompt Twilight to awaken, revealing that she had a really weird sense of humor. But that never happened. And Twilight was made to endure this unthinkable scenario. Spike, meanwhile, was still not impressed.
What's a black hoof? A top-secret hush-hush group made up of only the best of the best that Equestria has to offer.
Rainbow beamed with obvious pride.
The cream of the crop, the undisputable super elite, the ponies that get called in when the queen wants something to get done and get done right. How are you a black hoof?
Twilight asked sternly and sharply, practically demanding an answer.
Well, because of you, duh.
Rainbow Dash shrugged mockingly before tucking the badge into an interior pocket within her coat.
Why do you think I'm even telling you any of this? But how? Easy. You see, as I'm sure you remember, once upon a time, I got roped into being your personal flight coach by one Princess Miyamori Cadenza.
Dash's explanation was so bold that it almost sounded rehearsed. Something that Twilight would have believed right now, given the circumstances.
And that got me onto just the right radar. Queen Celestia's, if you have to know. And thanks to my mad skills, and a few other qualities.
That part of the explanation seemed to hide a bit of shame in it, but it was quickly snuffed out by her own self-gratification.
I was a prime candidate to join these ranks. And after I became a fully fledged Wonderbolt, I was given an offer I'd be stupid to refuse.
Twilight couldn't possibly believe that story. She couldn't. It was absurd. If she tried hard enough, she could probably even refute that badge, given enough time. If she put in the effort to examine every micrometer of material and find some fault or inconsistency, she could prove it to be nothing more than a simple forgery. A forgery that someone could get executed for crafting, let alone owning. But the documents on the ground only added further credit to the outrageous claim, especially with the mention of the Moonlight Choir in one of them. If this was a ruse, it was one elaborate enough to earn respect in and of itself.
What other qualities make you prime material?
Spike asked, shattering the silence and Rainbow's ego in one fell swoop. From the look on her face, she looked like she really didn't want to answer that one.
Well, that's the funny thing.
Dash nervously scratched at the back of her head with a chortle.
But I'm not gonna tell either of you. Is it because you don't look like you could be a professional at anything?
The long-dragged, snarky remark caught both Twilight's attention and that of Rainbow. Twilight in particular was surprised by just how snarky and sarcastic he was being. Now, she wasn't against this, but it was unexpected.
Hey, you gonna control your kid or something?
Rainbow was sweating buckets at this point. Her face flushed a brighter shade of red than the one found in her mane. Based on this, and how her lips were puckered, it looked like Spike had hit the nail on the head.
He's being really rude. Can't you, I don't know, ground him or something? He's not my kid.
Twilight rebutted in an unsure tone. The topic of her being Spike's quote-unquote mother hadn't been one she had thought about in a very long time. And she got caught off guard by it being brought up right now.
Oh, yeah, he is. Last time I saw you, you could hardly pry him off your back.
Dash's mood began to take an upswing as she found an opportunity to change the subject.
Not to mention the mommy talks you gave him. Spike, don't eat that! And, Spike, I can fly! Don't follow me off of cliffs!
The mocking tone of voice wasn't appreciated by either Spike or Twilight. At this point, Rainbow began packing up her things in a greater hurry than before.
Well, it's been fun, but I kinda wanna get back to my vacation. I'll see you around.
As Twilight watched the athlete redon her bags, filled to the brim with unspeakable knowledge that could very well help her, Twilight finally found the mindfulness to return to the present.
Hey, wait! I need to— Sorry, gotta go. Pinkie'll flip if I'm late for the homecoming party. Bye!
And like that, she was gone, rushing out the door before Twilight could muster up another word. There wasn't even time to magically hold the door shut or grab hold of her tail. There was practically a cartoonish Rainbow Dash-shaped smoke cloud left behind in her wake. Twilight groaned in response to this, hanging her head in angered defeat. She had just had potentially life-saving information literally thrown at her hooves, and she just let it get yanked out from under her because she had let herself get caught up in drama from her past. Something she had intentionally decided not to let happen anymore just earlier today. She lightly massaged one of her temples with a sigh as she slowly strolled into the kitchen. After all of that, she needed a glass of water. And maybe a sandwich or 7. A task that she got to work on as soon as she approached the fridge. She would need brain food if she was going to figure out what her next course of action was going to be.
Twilight?
After some time, Spike once more broke the tension, while Twilight was in the middle of making what could very well be the first of many sandwiches. The simple statement brought Twilight's attention over to him, standing in the open archway that separated the kitchen from the living room. And he looked to be even more distraught than she was at the moment. He was practically shaking, biting his lower lip as he looked at Twilight with weary eyes, looking to be on the brink of tears. He had picked up many habits from Twilight over the 6 years they had shared together, some of which Twilight wished he hadn't. Like her tendency to get caught up on one little thing and think far too much into it. Something she was guilty of doing a lot of in the past couple of days. And something she wholeheartedly wished she could cure Spike of. Especially right now, as he looked to be thinking far too much for his own good. Something made evident with his next question.
What am I to you?